Okay, we're going to start with chapter 3. Because 1 and 2 is the questions. And chapter 3 is where the explanation begins. Then we're going to do the review in chapter 3 of Heichaltzu. The first question is, what is the clip of Midyan? That we know, we went over it yesterday at length. It's a klipa that causes divisiveness, separation. But number 2 is, how does the Hebrew word midyan imply this nature of this klipa? How does it in the word of midyan? Good morning, Mazal Tov.
Thank you so much.
Amen.
Amen.
So the answer is that in Hebrew, the word madon means scribe, vision, and therefore the word midyan in itself, even though it's the name of a country, but it does imply division. Based on what it says in this mimer, question number 3, what is the key difference between Kedusha and Klipa? What is it that characterizes Kedusha? The main thing. So the answer to that is unity. Then in this mimer, he says that unity is what defines Kedusha, and separation and division is what defines Klipa. And we explained in class, it means to say this is not just one of the sort of details of Kedusha or Klipa, but in a certain way, this is the very definition of Kedusha is unity, and the very definition of Klipa is separation and division. And the reason for that is because Kedusha is bittul and Klipa is the opposite. Number 4, what does it mean when it says in the Mimer that the 10 spheres of Kedusha are in a way of escalus? What does escalus mean? The definition of the word escalus means inclusive. What does that mean? So we explained that it means, and we see this when we count the Omer, which we're going to start very soon, is that each sphere includes the others. That's why we count the Omer, we say Chesed Sheba Chesed, Gevurah Sheba Chesed, Tiferet Sheba Chesed, and that's why there are 49 days. Even though there's only 7 spheres, but each one of the 7 includes the other 6, or the other 7, all the 7. So therefore, altogether, there's 7 times 7 is 49. Klipa doesn't have that. Number 5, what is the difference between the way Yaakov expressed himself and the way Esav expressed himself? Yaakov said, Yeshli Koil. Esav said, Yeshli Rab. What's the difference? They both say, I have everything. I have enough. I have what I need. But they express it differently. When someone says, Yeshli Koil, I have everything, that's a word which is inclusive. I have everything. When you say, I have a lot by definition means many different things, and that's separation. So we see how even the way they spoke and the way they expressed themselves manifested the difference between Kedusha and Klipa. Why was it that the original amount of Jews in Mitzrayim was 70? If anyone would like to make an attempt to give an answer, you're welcome. Well, the answer is because our sources, of course, from the 7 midos of Kedusha, Chesed, Gvurah, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, Yisod, Malchus. Each one of the 7 contains in it 10. That means the origin of the Jewish people is connected to the number 70. It doesn't say this in the Bible, but it says in other places. Where do we see more clearly that our origin is from the number 7, because we all come from Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah. That's 7. And that's also the reason why the menorah had 7 branches. And the menorah represents the Jewish nation. Usually the Jewish nation is represented by number 10, the 12 tribes, sometimes 3, Kohanim, Leviim, Yisraelim. Like on Pesach, we eat 3 matzahs, it's for Kohen, Levi, Yisrael. Where does the number 7 come in? And the answer is because we all come from the 7 Avos and Imahos, Sarah, Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Sarah, Rachel, Leah. And basically this represents the 7 midos. What is Shvirus HaKelim? So we all know, we spoke about that yesterday. The vessels in the world of Tohu broke, and the light that's in the vessels left those vessels. Here was a question I asked yesterday, and we gave the answer yesterday, but now you can put it down in writing. Where are the Kelim in the infrastructure of the 10 spheres? Where do they belong? Is it above the 10? Is it below the 10? Or is it something different? Remember we said that it's not above, it's not below, it's the sphere. Each sphere consists of a light and a vessel. Remember we spoke about this yesterday, right? Okay, let's turn the page. Why is division and separation considered the cause for Shvirus HaKelim? So the answer is because what caused Shvirus HaKelim was that each sphere was intense and exclusive. Chesed was exclusively Chesed. Gevura was exclusively Gevura. And each sphere did not leave room for the other sphere. It couldn't allow anything else but Chesed. So because of that, and that's the device of it, that each sphere was exclusively whatever it is, not allowing room for the other. So then it clashed and it caused the Shvirus HaKelim. Number 10, what is the spiritual significance of the 7 nations? We're talking about the 7 nations that occupied Eretz Yisrael. 7 meters, Rois, right? The 7 meters in Klippa. What I didn't ask yesterday, didn't speak about it, but maybe you can figure it out now yourself. How come the general number for the nations of the world is 70? Same reason, because it's 7, and each one of the 7 has 10. The only thing is, this is in the world of Klippa, but the idea is the same. And even though today in the United Nations there's much more than 70 nations, so it's explained in the Sikhs and explained that there are 70 angels and they're in charge of all the 70 nations. The fact that there's more than 70 must mean that certain nations, smaller nations, are an extension or branches of a bigger one. But in essence, there are 70 major nations, and the other ones are branches and extensions. Why is Midian not mentioned as one of the 7 nations? Is it lower than the 7? Is it higher than the 7? Is it a branch of the 7? Where does it belong? According to what he explains in the Maimer. It's definitely not part of the 7. So it's not one of the 7. It's Kanani, Chiti, Amori, Prizi, Yebusi. These are the 7 nations, and Midian is not one of them. And if it's such an important nation that's, so basic that it's mentioned in the Torah, where does it belong in the 7? So the answer is, it's not a branch, and it's not lower, but it's higher. It's the source of the 7 nations. In other words, it's the source for the 7 negative character traits. Why? That's question number 12. Well, the answer is because Midian is about purity, separation from Hashem, being yesh, feeling independent of Hashem. And that brings separation between one and another, and that's where all the 7 character traits come in. All the 7 character traits are about person who has a passion for myself and my pleasure separate from Hashem, and that's why it all becomes to be something negative. If you'd have to write what's the main point of this chapter, the answer would be the main point of this chapter is to explain that Midyan, this is the first place where he starts explaining it. Midyan is the klipa of separation, of hate and separation one from another. Okay, and let's go to chapter 4. What is the definition of sinas chinam? Just the definition. The answer is baseless hate. In other words, chas v'shalom, one person hates another person, but there's no real reason why they hate them. What is the spiritual root of sinas chinam? Like what causes a person to hate someone else? Because, no, this question is what's the spiritual root, which means which is the klipa in the person, which sort of negative spiritual force, negative spiritual germ, bacteria is there that, you go to the doctor, he says, you have influenza 1, you have influenza 2, or influenza A, influenza B, you have COVID, God forbid, you have a strep. What's the name of this thing spiritually that causes sinas chinam? And the answer is that's midyan. That's klipa of midyan. Think of the klipa as like spiritual bacteria, spiritual germs that cause all sorts of negative reactions. Number 3, if the person did absolutely nothing to warrant hate, why would his friend have this sinas chinam? The whole Maimer explains is because of yeshus. That a person who's obsessed with self, and obsessed with glorifying self, and basically that means expanding myself and spreading myself out, and me occupying all the space, figuratively speaking, then I hate this other person just because of the fact that they're there and they occupy, especially someone who occupies some space, importance or prominence, that takes away from me occupying more space. Is it possible to have sinas chinam and have a reason for hate, and it's still called sinas chinam? How does that work? Right, the reason comes after. In my mind, I don't necessarily see it, but the reality could be that the hate is there and the reason comes after. I once saw a letter from the Rebbe about anti-Semitism, because people always wondering why the anti-Semitism, why do they hate us? And it says in the Torah that it's some sort of it's in their genes for whatever reason that they hate Jews. And the Rebbe says, did you see that in certain places they said the reason why they hate Jews is because they're the lowest class people around. They're poor and they're not clean. They put them down they're like mice, and they're nothing, and therefore we hate them. In other places, the reason why they hate them is because they're the richest people. They have all the money. They control the world. Somebody once said, I love to read Arab newspapers. When I read the Jewish newspapers or the Hebrew newspapers, see all the problems in Eretz Yisrael. When I read the Arab papers, it feels so good. The Jews control the world. They control all the banks. They even control the weather. It's like everything is, we're really on top of things. So what is it? Is it because we're poorer than the whole world, or because we're richer than the whole world? What is it so the answer is the hate is there, and the reasons come later. So if you can't give the reason of wealth, and you can't give the reason of poverty, they'll find a third reason. The reason is that they killed non-Jewish kids to take their blood. They'll fabricate whatever reason it is, because the hate comes first. Number 5, how would you define yeshus or yesh? So we said this many times. If you want to put it into words, I think the definition would be someone who's obsessed, an excessive sense, an excessive awareness and consciousness of self, to a point where it's excessive. And the way to define bittul is that the purpose is focused, a person focused on Hashem, on the purpose of what they're doing or what they're accomplishing spiritually, and not on self. Okay, so I went ahead of myself with number 7 and 8. I think we just explained. What does it mean that a yesh needs more space in which to spread out? And the more space he has to spread out, the more his presence is reinforced. But we explained that the word space, figuratively speaking, means importance, prominence, and especially recognition by others. The person who's a yesh wants others to compliment them, to recognize them, to acknowledge them. And that's why people have this desire to be famous. And it's very interesting that in the secular world, a world which is pretty much empty of values, one of the greatest things are if you become famous. You're a famous actor, you're a famous ball player, you're a famous artist. And very often, a lot of these famous people, when you go into their personal lives and you wonder how do they live, we had a woman here once, many years ago, and I can't even remember her name, but I remember she wasn't there that long, but she was from Israel. I think she said when she was there, she was a celebrity, something, maybe an actress. And she said people ran all after her to get her signature and made a whole commotion about her. And she said, my life was a mess. And I'm looking at all these people running after me and envying me and being jealous of me. And eventually she found Yiddishkeit and turned around and dropped everything. But there's a certain desire to be known. People should talk about me. People should. That's part of yeshus. Because the yesh, the more that it spreads out, the more it's strengthened. And I think we given an example. I don't know if anybody was in class. The difference between something which is emes and not. You remember that? One of the very important things, the difference between truth and not truth. I think that Ariella Malka actually mentioned it when she spoke about the Rambam, is that emes doesn't get any bigger, stronger, doesn't get reinforced even one iota by spreading out. Which means that if somebody would technically destroy every textbook in the world where it says 2 + 2 = 4. There'd be no blackboard or whiteboard that says 2 + 2 = 4. There'd be no person in the world that is even thinking that 2 + 2 = 4. Is this equation of 2 + 2 = 4 any less or weaker because of that? No. And the same is reverse. That if I would take this 2 + 2 = 4, and I would publish it in every single newspaper in the world, and I put it on every single website in the world, and I would publicize and spread it out as much as I can, does it become more truth because of that? No. But something which is sheker, something which is false, yes. Someone who fabricated, and God forbid, a lie about the Jews, for example, those that say the Holocaust never happened. No truth to it. What gives it strength? That people accept the lie. So the more people that accept it, the bigger it is. The less people that accept it, the smaller it is. If nobody accepts it, it's non-existent altogether. So something which is not emes doesn't need to be spread out, doesn't need to be accepted and acknowledged and recognized by anybody. It just is what it is. But something which is false needs to be acknowledged, needs to be accepted, and only then is it, and the more people that accept it, it's reinforced. So this nature, I want to spread out, and that it manifests itself by, I want people to talk about me, I want the people to I want to control people, I want to be on top of everything, and I think should be my way. It's all about me spreading out. That's because of something in me which is not emes. That's the yeshus. And that yeshus needs to be reinforced. The more it spreads out, the more reinforced it is. Bittul is emes. You connect it to Hashem, and it makes no difference. There's a story that I think I must have mentioned more than once, but that just shows that Yidden, the way a Yid is supposed to do mitzvahs is really in a very humble way. And there's a person, Hatzneya, Leches, and Hashem Elokecha. You should be tznius. People always associate tznius with clothing, but really tznius is not just clothing. Tznius means modesty in the way I live. that if I do something positive, I don't have to shout out into the world about this positive thing. I just do it because it's evidence. So there's a story of the Baal Shem Tov, that the Baal Shem Tov, it's a long story, but the main point related to this is that the Baal Shem Tov was told that he has to come out in the open. He was a hidden tzaddik, and the time has come that he has to teach Torah publicly. And he refused. He didn't want to, he was very humble. He didn't want to go out there. And it came to a point where he was told the following, that the reason why your soul came down to this world is you're a reincarnation of a Jew that lived 200 years before you. And that Jew was actually a simple Jew, and he lived in Tzvat. And this simple Jew, on the day, it was one day that he heard a knock on the door. It was after midnight. And he asked who's there, and he asked who was Eliyahu Hanavi. The door opened up. Eliyahu Hanavi walked in. The whole room lit up. And he said, I was sent from heaven to tell you something which no human being knows. And it's a reward for what you did on the day of your bar mitzvah. And what is he going to tell him? He's going to tell him when Mashiach is coming. But he said, I just want to know, what did you do on the day of your bar mitzvah that you deserve such a reward? Even I don't know. And what was his answer? He said, whatever I did was for Hashem, and therefore I don't want to share this with anyone else. Even Eliyahu Hanavi said, me? You're not going to tell me what you did on the bar mitzvah. I'm not going to tell you this big secret. So he said, nothing I can do about it. What I did was exclusively for Hashem. I'm not sharing it with anyone. And he left. And he didn't give him the secret. But of course, in the heavenly court, there was a huge commotion, how amazing this person is, that he's being offered such a gift from no one less than Eliyahu Hanavi, and he still declined. He rejected it because he does it only for Hashem. So now he deserves even a bigger reward. And he came back and he taught him Torah, and he became a very big tzaddik. And the Baal Shem Tov was told, even though he was a great tzaddik, but no one benefited from his righteousness and from his wisdom because he was a hidden tzaddik. And therefore, Baal Shem Tov was told, you had to come down to this world. And the whole purpose is that you should teach. In other words, make up for what happened in the first lifetime. If you're not going to teach Torah, you have no point being in this world anymore. But I want to focus on the part of the story that he doesn't want anybody to know. In other words, the fact that he did it in a way that no one should know means that it was the ultimate, the epitome of emes. It didn't need any publicity, it didn't need any spreading out. So why do we do so much of that today? Someone does something good, you credit and you acknowledge and you make a big point out of it and you publicize it. And the answer is because today is such a time where it's so difficult with everything, with Torah and mitzvahs, and so many tests and so many challenges, that anything we can do to encourage someone to do something positive should be done. I remember they ever spoke about people that don't give tzedakah. And then he said, and they argue and say, no, I give a lot of tzedakah, but I do it quietly. I do it, in a way which is tznius, no one knows about it. I don't want to publicize how I give tzedakah. And the Rebbe spoke about the importance, when one publicizes that they gave tzedakah, or the organization compliments them and praises them, this could motivate other people. They should also want to give tzedakah. If you publicize how people learn extra Torah, or children having a chidon and they're learning all the 650 mitzvahs, wow, that's an amazing thing. That'll motivate other people to have that knowledge, and so on. But in essence, it doesn't need the publicity because it's emes. Then we come to number 9 and 10. It's all connected. Why a yesh feels threatened by another person, because it takes away space, and a bittul is not feeling threatened because he's not focused on occupying space and having a name and having status and glorifying his name. He just focused on what needs to be done. I don't know, a lot of these things I repeat, but maybe the point was I wrote them, so if you keep writing the answer in different words, the concept remains very clear in our minds. Number 13, how did all the above explain why a yesh has sin as chinam? That's the hate that he can't stand the other person. So the main point of this chapter is, main point of the previous chapter was that Midian is all about division. The main point of this chapter is division is baseless hate, and baseless hate is because of yeshes. Now we go into chapter 8. Remember, we skipped 5, 6, and 7. I told you it was a little bit too much in the Kabbalistic direction, very deep, or deep Chassidus. Number 8, chapter 8, so in this booklet, it's page 70. What does it mean that Shviras HaKelim occurred because there was a Ratzu without a Shuv? So we explained that what is Ratzu and Shuv? Ratzu and Shuv is the two movements that exist in the world. In fact, we said this is the rhythm of the entire creation, but it's in the body, it's the heartbeat, it's the breathing, the inhaling and the exhaling, it's the pulse beat. There's a certain beat. That beat is in and out. What's the in and the out? In means we're drawn towards Hashem. Where a person yearns and craves to be connected to Hashem, that's Ratzu. Ratzu would mean running towards. Shuv means withdrawing, pulling back. Then I realized that if I go too strong, I could, God forbid, lose it and become included in Hashem, which would be amazing, but I'm not going to be where Hashem wants me to be. So therefore, the person has to pull back, and pull back means to be grounded and do mitzvahs here in this physical world. So why was Shviras HaKelim? Because in the world of Torah, something similar to that happened. The light of the Sphira, which is the real energy of the Sphira, the light, was so powerful, so intense, that it was drawn to its source, left the vessel, and just like a body, if the soul leaves, the body breaks down. When the vessel sort of left, the Kalim in that world broke down. So he says, number 2, why does Ratzui without Shuv indicate Yeshus? And Shuv after Ratzui is an indication of Bittul. I would think the opposite, that this desire and this passion to connect to Hashem, that's Bittul. I want to connect to Hashem. And the fact that a person makes themselves grounded and sort of lessens that intense love for Hashem, that's lessening it, that should be the opposite of Bittul. But we explain the answer is that there's my pleasure and there's Hashem's pleasure. My pleasure is to be as close to Hashem as I possibly can. And that's why they were tzaddikim, that this happened to them. They actually left this world and they became included in Hashem. That's what they want, to be as close as they can. Hashem's pleasure is that I should be here in this world and in the physical body with all its challenges and do mitzvahs. So if a person has rotzu, which means that they're going towards Hashem and they're not allowing themselves to be grounded, that their pleasure is overriding Hashem's pleasure. That's Yeshus. The one who has the same pleasure, like the story of the Alter Rebbe, that it was Yom Kippur, and he was in shul on Yom Kippur with his talis, in the middle of davening, and he sensed that there's a woman who's in danger. Why was she in danger? Because she just gave birth, and she was very weak. Her husband and children went to shul, and they had no idea that she's so weak. And Alter Rebbe saw that if nothing happened, she could, God forbid, pass out. So he went to her house. There was no fire. So he went and chopped wood on Yom Kippur and lit a fire on Yom Kippur, cooked soup on Yom Kippur, and he fed her the soup that she should survive. So we have to stop and think to ourselves where the Alter Rebbe was when he was, I'm sure everybody here in this room, which is part of the human race, there's certain things that you enjoy and you love and you're so into it, you're so attached to it, that when you have to stop, you just don't want to. Sometimes you go visiting a place and really enjoying it, and the time comes to go home, it's very hard. Whereas kids, you remember playing the game and having a good time, and then you get called, oh, it's supper time, and you just don't want to stop. This Alter Rebbe had the greatest pleasure in his devotion to Hashem, and he was totally wrapped in it with his talus. And to basically tear himself away from that and go do something which is so foreign to Yom Kippur, cooking and chopping wood and all that, that means he gave up his pleasure for Hashem's pleasure. Hashem wants you to think about the life of another Yid. But if a person wouldn't be able to accomplish that, for example, they would say, I know she's in danger, but I can't let go. That would mean that my pleasure is overriding Hashem's pleasure. Number 3, this is just to help understand more clearly the above mentioned 2 words, Rotzi and Shuv. Does this describe the of the spheres or the Keli? I'll let someone answer that question. When you say in the world of the Torah there was a Rotzi and not a Shuv, when you say Rotzi or Shuv, is it applying to the vessel or to the light? Or, of course, it's about the light leaving the vessel or being in the vessel. So it's all about the light. Okay. What is the relationship between Shviras HaKelim and the world of Tohu and Sinas Chinam? So the answer is Shviras HaKelim came as a result of division. So up there in that world, it's a spiritual world. So obviously it's not division the way we know it, God forbid, being selfish and all that. It's division on a much, much higher spiritual level, but in a very fine, microscopic, fine, subtle way is division. But from there, it evolves. And what it evolves into down here, that people have this nature of absolute division, which is baseless hate. In recent times, this inability, one person accepting the other, where is it found most? And the answer was definitely about people who are Ovdei Hashem, that they're serving Hashem. So they happen to have this more than the others. Like we explained, maybe the reason is because the Yetzer Hara has them justifying it, that it's because of spiritual reasons that I hate this person. Because I'm moral and they're not moral. I'm a person who fear Hashem. This person doesn't fear Hashem. So they don't feel that if they're Yeshus, they think it's all about my concern for Hashem. The real root of the problem is Yeshus, meaning division. How does this explain why one person can't see and accept the other person's opinion, specifically in communal issues? So the answer is that it appears that I can't accept their opinion because I think differently. But the real reason is not I think differently because whatever you say, I want to say the opposite. I can't acknowledge what you say, especially if you have a good plan, especially if you thought of a brilliant, original, creative idea that I really hate it because that really gives you more prominence and more credit. What could be the worst consequence as a result of sinas chinam regarding communal issues? The answer is that the communal issue gets unfortunately destroyed. In other words, it's about building a shul, about getting a rav, about getting a sheikhet, doing something which is going to be tzedakah to help people in the community, and you get into arguments about how to do and what to do. And as a result of that, very often the project falls apart and the community suffers. And unfortunately, because people are so obsessed with self, they don't care that the whole project fell apart and the community suffers as long as it's not my way. If it's not my way, I won't allow it to happen. Okay, but we have to always finish with something positive. That people who have bittul, they don't care if they do get the credit, they don't get the credit. Like the Baal Shem Tov story, he didn't want anyone even to know that he did it. Even Eliyahu Navi shouldn't know. Only Hashem himself. And that's because they're not interested about credit, not interested in having a good name, not interested in glorifying their name, they're just interested in doing emes because it's emes is the right thing to do. Okay, we'll stop here. To be continued after Pesach. Yes, Hashem. And next week we'll be learning all about Pesach from a Hasidic perspective. Okay. Very welcome.
Thank you so much.
It was today or last night or?
Last time, but today. Yeah. I'm going to do it.